Good morning, friends. Today we will continue where I had left yesterday. The second point of Karl Marx about the base and superstructure is that the ruthless objective and inevitable impulse to growth which characterized production for industrial mode of production in capital dominated liberal democracies or the party dominated national capitalism or democratic dictatorial regimes of countries like Russia and Turkey. The predominant use of profit for capital accumulation takes a historically unique characteristics, namely the concentration of wealth and power in a small number of giant industrial and financial corporations. That had brought with it an increasingly universal struggle between capital and labor, both manual and mental labor. The next point is that in capital, Karl Marx's fundamental aim was to lay bare the laws of motion, uh, the same laws of motion which was formulated for the first time by Isaac Newton in Principia Mathematica. Marx is trying to formulate laws of motion which govern the origins, the rise, the development, the decline, and the disappearance of a given social form of economic organization, namely the capitalist mode of production. This he wrote before his death in 1883. Today it can be reformulated as economic organization in industrial mode of production in market capitalist society like United States of America or national capitalist society of People's Republic of China or democratic dictatorship in Russia, Turkey and other countries. In this sense, Marx was not seeking the universal laws of economic organization. According to Marx in Capital Volume 1, no such laws exist. For Marx, there are no economic laws which are valid for each and every basically different form of society. Each specific social form of economic organization had its own specific laws. Capital of Marx limits its analysis to examining specifically those laws which govern the capitalist mode of production, because then the other two mode of industrial productions today represented by China or the third represented by Russia and Turkey did not exist. Capital, the book, does not present pure or formal economic theory at all. For Marx, pure economic theory, that is, a theory which abstracts from a specific social structure, is theoretically impossible. Marx's theory of historical dialectics or dialectical materialist development of human society and history does indeed include comparative economic analysis from slave society or ancient society through feudal society to the capitalist society, but such comparison, according to Marx, can result only from the analysis of the specific modes of production, each with its own economic logic and its own laws of motion. These laws cannot be superseded by or subsumed under eternal or universal economic laws of development or motion. If one tries to discover basic work, basic working hypotheses valid for all economic systems, one passes from the realm of economic theory to that of the social structures, that is dialectical materialist mode of social formations. Marx's capital is based upon an understanding of the relativity social determination and historical limitation of all economic laws. In the socio-economic development of mankind, commodity production, market economy, or the distribution of social resources among different branches of production by objective economic laws operating behind the back of the producers do not correspond to human nature, about which we have already discussed in the earlier classes when I was dealing with concept of man and society in the writings of Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. Let me read this sentence again. objective economic laws operating behind the back of the producers do not correspond to human nature, which have not always existed and will not always exist. Uh, Marx is trying to say that although the nature of man or the nature of human beings on earth had remained more or less the same, but the economic structure of production, distribution, and exchange has been changing continuously, which can be explained by a dialectical relationship between the mode of production and relations of production. Within mode of production, his emphasis is more on the relations of production than on forces of production. Now, the forces of production in classical political economy are usually land, labor, capital, and enterprise. Until 18th century, Western Europeans had neither the most fertile land nor they had the most efficiently trained manpower or labor, nor they had institutionalized accumulation of capital. Nor they were having cultural capital to organize enterprise of economic production on a large scale before 18th century. Therefore, Karl Marx is concentrating about development of capitalist mode of production after 18th century in a specific cultural region, uh, Western Europe, and within Western Europe, as historian Braudel has pointed out, Marx was primarily relying on the data from the Mediterranean. Chiefly from three countries: United Kingdom, France, and Germany. But as Andre Gunder Frank has asserted in his last two books, Reorient, the first book, and Reorienting the 19th Century, Marx was primarily dealing with the economic logic of industrial mode of production, primarily for the European colonies outside Western Europe, although Marx did not say it explicitly in Capital Volume 1, but in case you read the 3 volumes of Capital available today, there are references which emphasize the concept of human power, the theory of alienation, commodity fetishism, or the concept of value generation, including the concept of surplus value and wage labor. And in the process, he develops the concept of history in a unique way, given the history of conceptualization in European countries. Marx in Capital tried to explain the origins of the capitalist mode of production by following the Scottish tradition of political economy, and unless and until we situate Capital Volume 1 within the Scottish school of political economy developed by David Hume and Adam Smith. Much of the theoretical logic in the capital will be lost in wilderness. In the process of developing his argument, Marx hints towards the inevitable historical decline and fall of this capitalist social system. Now, historically, this prediction about inevitable historical decline and fall of this capitalist social system has not developed. This prediction could not validate itself because of two empirical tendencies. Number one, even if we disregard the Communist Manifesto or the earlier writings of Karl Marx, even in the Capital 3 volumes, Marx was trying to make a theoretical formulation that because of inner contradictions in the capitalist mode of production, primarily between the labor and the capital, or the forces of productions and the relations of productions. The implication was that, capitalism will decline in Europe, Western Europe in particular, and it will give way to a different type of production, which he had named scientific socialism in his earlier writings. But empirically, there are two historical tendencies which have gone against theoretical formulation of Karl Marx. One, growth of or development of scientific socialism did take place, if not in entirety or holistically, from capitalism to socialism, but it did not took place in the same space and during the same stipulated time. In other words, socialism did emerge in some countries, on the same lines which Marx had outlined in his earlier writings, and which remained in subdued form in Capital 3 volumes as well. But it did not emerge from the old capitalist mode of production in Western Europe, which Marx was trying to explain. Marx was trying to explain that socialism is a later stage of capitalist mode of production itself, because he believed that there is nothing wrong in the industrial mode of production which is based on the forces of production, like land, labor, and enterprise. Only two things will change, according to Karl Marx. During the inevitable historical decline and fall of this capitalist social system, one, the private ownership of the means of productions will be abolished, and instead of individual ownership of the means of productions, which include both forces of production, including land, labor of a particular kind, rational, efficient organization or management of economic enterprise, and rational, legal development of industrial profit. But and you know this is to a large extent correct, that there is no structural difference between accumulation of capital in China or the earlier Soviet Union or United States of America. Industrial mode of production, irrespective of the political regimes, follows more or less the same, standard procedures. But Marx said that if not in the production process, there will be a structural change in the ownership of the means of productions, distribution of the profits, and exchange of goods and services in the socialist form of industrial production. This is also to a large extent true, if not literally, then at least theoretically, analytically, heuristically. But where Marx went wrong, into major directions, he proved to be wrong. One was that socialist mode of production, according to Marx, will be part of the same dialectical materialist development of economy, whereas in actual history, socialism developed simultaneously with capitalism, not on the foundations of developed industrial mode of social formations. Rather, it developed in primarily agricultural societies of Eastern Europe and China. In other words, capitalism and socialism are not two stages of the same industrial mode of production as Marx had predicted, and it was not a philosophical prediction, rather it was a theoretical prediction of a political economist. It was not like Hegelian prediction about the rise of Germany. Secondly, where Marx went wrong was that he considered the industrial laborers and some sections of the middle class intelligentsia, represented by people like Friedrich Engels and Marx himself, as a revolutionary force, whereas he derided peasants as lovers of stagnation and backward-looking conservative people. This has proved to be wrong. When October Revolution took place, Bolshevik Revolution took place in Russia in 1917, Russia was largely, an agrarian economy. So was China in 1914. 1859. Therefore, we can say that Marxist concept of inevitable logic of capitalist development into a socialist mode of production did not fructify in empirical history. Second, his theory that today, when he was writing 1870s, he considered that although today there are three classes, the upper class or the ruling class, the middle class and the labor class, but ultimately there will be only two classes, the ruling class and the labor class. But until now, this has not happened. There is not only continuation of the three classes, the upper class, middle class, and the lower class in every country of first world, second world, and third world. I am talking about the post-Second World War classification, which I have discussed already in the earlier classes. But the peasants or farmers have demonstrated their revolutionary potential. If not in Western Europe or United States of America, then at least in Eastern Europe and parts of Asia, including China, Nepal, and some states of undivided India. But in the post-corona world, as things are going, when during lockdown, majority of middle class people around the world were staying at home, and there was reduction of their salary or their job was terminated, at least in the private sector, and where the laborers were simply unemployed and they were facing the stupendous task of managing without job, without resources, the livelihood of their families. The rich, the powerful, the upper class, everywhere in the world was becoming more rich without economic activity, simply on the basis of manipulation of the stock market. There is also a simultaneous tendency that the science of robotics is gradually coming into the market for commercial use, and there is mechanization of production, distribution through the digitalization of economy. I suspect the Marxist prediction in Capital 3 volumes may be a reality if the present trend continues. The middle class will be eliminated, and there will be only two classes: the ruling class and the labor class. But in Marx's time, the mental laborers were in middle classes and only the manual laborers were in the lower classes. Now the possibility exists that in near future, not very distant times, but in near future, by 2014, the middle class may be completely replaced. Some of the middle class people will be appropriated or included in the ruling class, because it is not only the golden age of capitalism after the initial setback from about 1968-69 till 1989. It was the height of the Cold War. But after the fall of the Berlin Wall till 2007-8, when global stagflation began. Stagflation means a unique trend where there is both stagnation and inflation together, which does not happen most of the time, because in case there is stagnation in the economy, the demand will be falling and the supply will not fall, given the mathematical logic of capitalist mode of production or industrial mode of production. Therefore, the prices will go down. But what happens in stagflation is that although the economic activity had slowed down by 2007 September in United States of America, and by 2008 elsewhere, excluding India and China. But now during Corona period or lockdown, even the economy of China in India has slowed down. The economy of India has slowed down more than the economy of China. Nonetheless, there is a slowdown in the growth of economic enterprise, and there is a stagflation. The demand is declining. The purchasing power of people at large is declining. but the prices are not declining, which should have been the logical course in the uh, capitalist mode of production following Adam Smith and others. Even Keynes, uh, as there is less demand, the prices would fall. As there will be more demand, the prices of the commodities and services would go on. It will be up. But in stagflation, both contradictory things are happening together. The purchasing power of people at large in the global market is decreasing. Employment is decreasing, therefore income is decreasing, and in case income is decreasing, the purchasing power is decreasing. But even then, the prices of labor and commodity is not going down. It is going up. It is a complex phenomenon, and this is a serious crisis of capitalism. Capitalism had faced a similar crisis in 1930s, but then economist J. M. Keynes emerged as the savior of capitalism. He provided measures which helped capitalism survive the great crisis of 1930s. But since 2007 September till now, no economist had been able to solve this crisis of global capitalism. And there is a possibility, although in society, Marxism as a political ideology has been discredited totally and for good reason, because political Marxism was a bogus thing. But academic Marxism will become attractive because of the sound logic and insights Marx provided in Capital Volume 1. Therefore, Marxist, prediction has been delayed in fructifying, but there is a possibility of it being true in the course of time because of many factors which I cannot discuss now, but I will discuss this definitely next week when I deal with the concept of power and morality in the writings of the three great writers, Emil Durkheim, Karl Marx, and Max Weber. At the moment, let me underline 2-3 more points. Number one, according to Marx, capitalism itself is a product of history. It will perish in due course, and he had not given a precise time for this due course, at least in his Capital. It is another matter that his political followers were having fool's paradise, but that could not sustain the assault of history because of internal contradiction of political Marxism in Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and China in particular. But it cannot be denied that a new social form of economic organization will then take place, and it has indeed taken place. And what is that? That is late capitalism, about which Marx hinted, but it was developed as a theory, the concept of late capitalism, by his follower in political economy, Ernst Mendel, who has written the introduction of Capital Volume 1. Now, what Ernst Mendel has said as late capitalism is called by many others as postmodernism. What is the basic difference between, capitalism, classical capitalism, which Karl Marx tried to explain, and late capitalism? In classical capitalism, which Marx envisaged, there was competition, fair competition in the fair market. It was called laissez-faire between two capitalists. They were competitors in classical capitalism, but in late capitalism, as Ernst Mendel has demonstrated forcibly in his book Late Capitalism, instead of competition in late capitalism, capitalist producers are collaborating the world over, and it has given rise to the global solidarity of capitalist class, whereas Marx and Engels together had predicted the global solidarity of the labor class. That has not taken place. What has taken place instead is global solidarity of the capitalist class, and it has been explained, theoretically, by following the Marxist logic of capital by his follower, fellow academic in 20th century, Ernst Mendel, in the book Late Capitalism. I must end here. Thank you, friends. We will take it up tomorrow.